The Keystone Pipeline is a proposed project that would take processed oil from Canada's oil sands in Western Canada and Alberta and pipe it down to the Gulf Coast in the U.S. By building the pipeline, you would enable the U.S. to greatly increase the amount of that oil sands crude it would bring into the United States. It would boost North American oil production, probably lower the price of oil.
The oil sands of Alberta are estimated to hold 170 million barrels of petroleum, the largest reservoir of black gold outside of Saudi Arabia. Because the pipeline crosses an international boundary, President Barack Obama has the final say over whether to give the project a green light.
And we're telling President Obama, it's your turn. It's your turn to be the change that you've talked about in your 2008 race. It's your turn to be the change you've talked about in your inaugural address.
But what kind of a president kills 20 to 50,000 construction jobs?
Say yes to new jobs, yes to economic growth.
We know that these are good jobs for families. There is no doubt about that. But what TransCanada then puts through that pipeline is not good for our families. And that is not fair. They are good jobs for 2 years, and then we assume the risk for the rest of our lives. And that is not okay.
The only comprehensive study of the Keystone XL from a disinterested party was done by Cornell. Their primary focus was the job claims and economic claims of TransCanada. Concerning the 20,000 jobs claim, the study found that the pipeline would create no more than 2,500 to 4,650 temporary direct construction jobs for 2 years, and this was based on TransCanada's own data supplied to the State Department. Additionally, the study found that the overwhelming majority of the manufacturing, mostly of steel pipes, would be done overseas in India and South Korea.
American environmentalists oppose the pipeline partly because they oppose the burning of fossil fuels, especially those extracted from relatively dirty oil sands. But if America doesn't build the pipeline, that oil is still going to be processed and enter the environment. It'll just get bought by China and other countries looking for cheap and plentiful energy. And TransCanada, the company behind the pipeline, is already working on contingency plans to do just that.
There's already lots of signs, actually, that that's not true, that there's been articles in the Wall Street Journal and various financial industry magazines that say that this pipeline is the linchpin for the tar sands industry to expand. And so it's true that they'll continue to kind of export and mine about 3 million barrels a day, but this pipeline alone would be almost 1 million barrels a day. They need this pipeline. If they get this pipeline approved, they have plans to crisscross the United States with other tar sands pipelines, which is why it's so critical for us to stop this pipeline.
Canada said that they expected 11 spills over a 50-year period. In its first year, it had over 35 spills.
The Keystone Pipeline is a project that has been in operation since 2010, a system of pipelines that transport bitumen, or extremely heavy crude oil, mixed with silica sand, clay minerals, and water from Alberta, Canada to Houston, Texas. Tar sands are a relatively new fuel source, and therefore are highly controversial in the public and political spheres.
The Keystone Pipeline exists in 4 phases. These pipelines have been completed and are currently operational without any major complications or resistance. The major obstacle faced by TransCanada, the primary supporter of the Athabasca tar sands, is the approval of Phase 4, the Keystone XL pipeline, which would run from Alberta, Canada to Steel City, Nebraska.
Tar sands are a combination of clay, sand, water, and bitumen, a thick, viscous oil. This material cannot be pumped from the ground and must be strip mined using open pit techniques.
Proponents of this pipeline argue that its construction would lower emissions, as it would reduce reliance on trucks and railways. In addition, they argue that the crude oil will be consumed in one way or another.
It is also said that the creation of the pipeline will increase the energy security of the U.S. and decrease reliance on imports from Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and the Persian Gulf.
TransCanada purports the creation of jobs. The numbers have fluctuated, ranging from 20,000 in 2011 to 9,000 as the most recent estimate. These job predictions are strictly construction-based. Once construction is completed, net job creation estimates range between 35, based on a study completed by the State Department, to 7,000 according to TransCanada.
One of the primary arguments against the creation of this pipeline is the likelihood of spills. This syncrude is mixed with natural gas prior to transportation, so in the event of a spill, the natural gas evaporates quickly, leaving the original heavy syncrude, which sinks to the bottom of bodies of water and constitutes an intensive cleanup process.
TransCanada reports that they estimate no more than 2 oil spills every 10 years along the entirety of the pipeline, and that the 2013 spill in North Dakota was significantly smaller than the Deepwater Horizon spill in the Gulf of Mexico, where an estimated 62,000 barrels of oil per day flowed into the ocean for a total of 87 days. However, to date, The number of spills along the existing pipeline has already surpassed TransCanada's estimates.
The water source at the heart of this issue is the Oglala Aquifer, which spans 8 states and supplies drinking water for 82% of the people who live within its boundaries. The aquifer is a vast underground water table beneath the Great Plains of the United States. Should this pipeline spill over the aquifer, the contents will indisputably sink into the aquifer and contaminate the groundwater supplies.
Another concern is the increasing dependency on non-renewable resources. According to Tom Steyer, an environmental activist, a yes on Keystone would mean more oil extracted, more carbon pollution. We face irreversible changes that will come at a catastrophic cost.
The U.S. Department of State released a statement declaring that the pipeline would have little environmental effect in the foreseeable future. However, many environmentalists are disputing the report, as it was headed by an individual heavily involved in the oil industry, rather than a non-biased evaluator.
Now the waiting game begins. Secretary of State John Kerry, who has avoided issuing a statement on the pipeline thus far, has been delegated the task of advising the president. He is delving into the 11-volume report with no definite timeline. The president is expected to make a decision on the fate of the Keystone XL sometime this spring.